And there's work that was done a decade ago in mice, for example. You can take an obese mouse, and they start off with sterile mice, and they take an obese mouse, and they take a thin mouse, a healthy mouse. If you take the obese stool and feed it to the thin mouse, it becomes obese. You don't change the diet, you don't change anything else, activity or anything. The microbes in that mouse's GI tract dictates the obesity of the mice and rats. And now we've seen other versions of that in humans since then, right? That was a decade ago. They figured out that the microbiome was absolutely linked with obesity just by transplanting. Now, if they took a thin mouse stool, and put it back in the obese mouse, he became thin. Now, of course, we don't want people running around and eating, thin people's stool. That's not what we're advocating here. And we're more complex people. So that just showed us that the microbiome is central to what we're doing, and we need to bring a lot of that back without question.
Welcome to the Heal Deal podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Leona Allen, and I'm here to help you achieve more freedom in your health and your life. I'm the founder of Freedom Health Systems, and I've been a licensed chiropractor and wellness coach for over 2 decades. I've helped men, women, and children transform their lives by removing the physical, chemical, and emotional barriers to natural healing. Every week, I'll be taking you on a journey where you will discover the real truth behind what it takes to heal your mind, body, and soul. Allow me to be your guide as you travel this road to renewed health and a new life. It's time to make a deal with yourself to heal yourself. Please keep in mind that this podcast is for educational purposes only and not to be used as a replacement for medical diagnosis or treatment. With that said, let's begin. Today I'm joined by Dr. Shayne Morris, a third-generation supplement industry innovator with over 40 years of experience who holds a PhD in molecular biology and biochemistry. Dr. Morris is the owner of Systemic Formulas, a company founded by his grandfather, and is the founder of Alimentum Labs. And today we're going to go deep into how our metabolism has been hijacked by our food, by toxins, by hormones. We're really going to get into it, and we're going to compare natural solutions and also to a lot of the mainstream solutions that many of you may be considering taking, or you've already been taking it. So we're going to create some clarity into what's really going on in the body and what it really needs in this journey as we try to heal our metabolism, lose weight, reverse chronic disease. So if this is you, this is the right episode for you, because we're going to go really deep into what is really happening in our body and also understanding solutions. I'm not going to let you go without some solutions. Are you doing everything right, but still battling fatigue, brain fog, and weight that just won't budge? Here's the truth. It's not your willpower, it's your metabolism, and I can show you exactly how to fix it. I just released a free breakthrough training that reveals why 88% of Americans are metabolically broken and the 3-phase system that reverses it. If you're ready to stop spinning your wheels and start seeing real results, go to beginhealingtoday.com. Again, that's beginhealingtoday.com, and you'll also find this link in the description. Now back to the episode. So Dr. Morris, just good to have you here today. We're going to go right into it. But go ahead and share a little bit. For those who don't know you, I know you pretty well, but I want you to share with the audience who you are, what you do, and then we're going to go into our metabolic crisis and some of those solutions today.
Yes, thank you for having me. So indeed, my grandfather, he began his journey back even before Systemic, and Systemic was founded in 1984. I joined this part of the journey, and I actually joined as in the world of manufacturing, to be honest, and then worked on my way through lots of different parts of my journey. But began in manufacturing, grew into that, did a lot, grew the company, went on to my undergraduate and graduate degrees in a related field. So my passion for it really did begin quite early. I was very much interested in not only the industry as a whole, but it was really fascinating to me that the way my brain worked and the excitement around, to begin with, what I would call microbes and herbs. There was this long history of herbal use. And of course, in our industry, we were, back in the 80s and 90s, we were using herbs very therapeutically, which is what they're designed for in many ways. But the science was really rather thin. And so I think where my life took a bit of a turn was I looked at it and said, wait a second, there's been thousands of years of these herbal and microbial uses, like in fermentation, for example, but no one really understood how they worked. There was a lot of information about that they did work. This idea of ethnobotanical use, medicinal, medicine people around the globe. Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine were two. You have the Polynesian practices and the Native American practices. And that's kind of what my grandfather did. He just went around and learned about which herb did which thing, but no one really was concerned about how they worked, right? And that was where my brain went. So I went on to school to study that concept. So I had to learn chemistry, biochemistry, microbiology, and some other sciences in order to get a much more firm grounding of what these things did. And by the time I finished that journey, I was back into this industry. I worked for a large corporation in this industry, and that wasn't for me. I'd always wanted to own my own business. So I then really bought into systemic and, came back to the family, so to speak. And that was in 2007. Since then, it's been nothing but an exciting, invigorating, passionate drive to get better at what we do, to be more significant in this industry, because over that same period of time, this industry's kind of changed in the sense that, we have a lot of social platforms. We have a lot of minimal information that gets used to help people make decisions around their health. And although I love the excitement around it, it does lack detail. It lacks specificity. It lacks understanding. Just because someone says, well, take your vitamin or take your prebiotic or take your herbal concoction, you're going to get better. And that's really not how it works. I think you and I both can appreciate that there is these things work, but they work in such a specific way. And there's other factors that you have to be educated. You have to be somewhat knowledgeable about the body and the processes that we have, as well as how these things affect that. So, of course, my research, our clinical work, our product development, and then talking with people like yourself, it helps us educate on why things and how things work. And when they don't work, there's always a reason. One of the shortcomings, I think, of our industry is just do this, this, and this, and you're going to feel better. And it's not that simple, right? It's never quite one size fits all. Or just make sure you take your magnesium every day and you'll have a bowel movement. You will, but that's really not that's not solving the problem. That's just giving your motor migrating complex, and that just is pushing it out of you. But there's still something going on there. So understanding that means, yes, we can use magnesium for a minute, but let's figure out why we're constipated. What's going on? What's the microbiome doing? What's your diet doing? And that we dig deeper, and that's kind of the passion part. So I am very excited about that. And that's kind of what's motivated what we do. And we now have, our breadth of herbal nutritional products. And now we have some genetic or more directed products in the Alimentum line. So we have the systemic line, the Alimentum line, and then we have our prebiotics and probiotics. And one of the stories that you and I can get into is we've weaved all of this in the last, let's say, 50 years, and it's gotten more and more. There's been more and more focus on what we've done wrong and what the kind of the issues that we're all facing. We're facing more fatigue, more stress. We've gotten way more chronic or immune-related issues. So we used to be very frightful of bacterial infections or viral infections or other. These things we've changed the trajectory decades ago on dying of an infection, right? That's been a big deal, antibiotic use and all that. But what we've replaced it with are these chronic, debilitating issues like thyroid and heart and neurological and autism spectrum disorders and all of these, skin issues. These are all immunological in many ways. Those have grown, and they haven't grown in populations where they haven't been industrialized. So let's be clear about that. When you look at people in more rural areas of Africa, South America, some of Indonesia, where they're more isolated, they haven't practiced this westernized life. Now, there's been a lot of great things we get in our life here, but we have most definitely compromised our food sources, our exposure to all kinds of toxins, our exposure to stresses. And in the process, we've lost a lot of our innate abilities. And one of those, of course, is the microbiome. There's been huge extinction events in industrialized people, us of westernized populations like North America, Europe, and it's gradually moving into other countries. And so it's a concern, and we need to address it. And of course, like the topic here, one of those is metabolic issues. I didn't list that the first time, but clearly we are becoming an obese population. There's just no way around it. And when I say obese, I'm not just talking about weight. I'm talking about the strain on our heart, the strain on our lungs, the strain on our ability for our hormones to function properly, or our neurological systems to function properly. They're all connected. And that's a big consideration. It's worth talking about. It's worth fixing.
You said some key things before we're going to get into it, because one thing you said that's so important is not just what to take, but how it works and why we need it. So a lot of people just randomly taking stuff. But what I like about your education and using your products for over 20 years, what I love about your company is you explain why things work. So not only are we going to talk about some solutions, we're going to talk about why and how those solutions are effective. And then about obesity, yeah, it's really changed the way weight loss and obesity and how we address it has really changed significantly in the last 20 years. It went from eat less, exercise more to, okay, just take a shot in your abdomen every day or get, liposuction or, it's really evolved and changed. But, and then what's also happening is that people are becoming more and more disconnected to how their bodies work. So obesity is way beyond it's more looked at as a cosmetic issue when people don't really understand why obesity is dangerous, that visceral fat. And like you said before, how it affects the heart and other organs of the body. So I really want people to understand how these diseases affect the body, how some of these solutions affect the body, and ways that we need to start evolving to so we can heal again.
And I'm glad you summarized that, because it's true. The idea of fat storage, and and of course, when we think of fat storage as the preeminent way of survival, which is what our body does to maintain energy resources in times of less input, less food availability. Well, we've long passed that mark, right? Very few people in the Western world struggle to hit their day-to-day marks. Where famines used to be something that we were very concerned about, now it's overindulgence or over-consuming, especially highly processed foods. So this mechanism that allows us to survive has worked against us when we're not treating it properly, meaning that we're eating, too much food, and the vast majority of that is this ultra processed food. Secondarily, I mentioned all the other things that we're exposed to, and these are targeting systems and hijacking systems like our microbiome that work against us. So now you overlay all these underlying pieces, and we're not simply, I want to clarify that when we think of our body and just fat, right? We can say, as you mentioned, we go, well, I'm overweight, so I'm just going to stop eating as much. I'm going to get on a new diet. I'm going to only eat this food, or I'm going to just eat protein, and or someone says I'm just going to eat salads, or I'm There's all these options. And for any given person at any given time, we see these intermittent or short bouts of success, right? We wouldn't keep trying these things, or we wouldn't keep seeing this. I mean, since the time I was a kid, commercials on TV were where they were promoting diet. I don't know, there's the Atkins diet, which was one of the first more keto style diets, carnivore protein. And there were many others throughout my lifetime, and they come and go. And they tend to be just re-emerging similar than what they were in the past. But this focus on simply caloric in, caloric out, or limiting your diet to very few items so that you can try to recharge your fat burning. I can tell you that this is not a long-term strategy. It's a tactical piece. And there are times where I even say, hey, let's get you on more protein. Let's reduce these other things that seem to be problematic in your diet. But our goal is to get you back into a very beautiful, diversified diet at the end. I don't want you to be on this diet long-term, because there are consequences of that. There's consequences to maintaining this diet that is so specific or so eliminating. Although argumentably, your patients or other clinicians would say, well, when I put X number of people on this, I do have some level of success. And that's true, that you will. When you're controlling someone's diet, you will have some successes. Now, you'll have some failures too. We don't talk about the failures. If you put a bunch of people on a diet, you may not, you're not going to get all positive, right? It's going to be intermixed. So what does that mean? That means we don't understand what we're doing. And what we're doing is we want to reset the body in a way that we look at we look at the microbiome, we look at our food intake, obviously, we look at all of the mechanisms that have been derailed by our current lifestyle. And we look at what can we do to bring those back? What herbs become important? What foods become important? And what kind of microbes do we want to bring back into the body to help us manage these herbs and dietary choices? And there's this interplay, because one affects the other. Food affects our neurological. So when we eat, and let's try to get people excited about this through this concept of like GLP-1. GLP-1 has kind of taken the market, right? It's a simple solution to what people are addressing, and that is overweight people or obesity. GLP-1 happens to be a product that for many people, seems to help them lose weight. Now there are consequences, and those are slowly coming out. But let's take that as the premise to tell people how really complicated it is. And by focusing on one thing, you're missing 20 other things. So GLP-1 is one of the hormones that helps create this feeling of satiety. And it works through insulin as well. So it's another hormone. And what it does is it can help delay your gastric emptying. It can help create a satiety, so you're not as hungry more often. So people that are using GLP-1 don't feel as hungry, therefore they're not eating as much. And it doesn't regulate what they eat, right? They might even be, when they do feel hungry, they're going to have hamburger and fries or pizza or donut. I mean, it doesn't help you in that aspect, but it does restrict this feeling of wanting to eat. Well, it, in conjunction with many other hormones, and remember, hormones work on our brain through the vagal cell. They are hormones, so they're telling our body what to do. And if we take a look at what we really want to be improving upon, it is insulin, GLP-1. We have an enzyme or a hormone called PYY, which acts very much a lot like GLP-1. We have glucagon. We have cholecystokinin or CCK. We have pancreatic polypeptide. We have amylin, and we have ghrelin. And so each and every one of these, and this is the short list, affects the way our hormones dictate when we want to eat, what we want to eat, how long it gets digested, how long the nutrients get pulled out, and what our brain is feeling from these meals. We send signals to our brain, and our brain is going to be responding to those signals. And if your brain doesn't respond to each and every one of these, then you've derailed something that needs to happen. And a lot of these dictate how your microbiome behaves after this food is coming. So as soon as we start chewing some food, the hormone in your mouth sends a signal to your brain. Prepare the stomach. The stomach is going to start prepping for the food to hit the stomach, so then it's going to release the leptin gets involved, and we're going to release the hydrochloric acid and the enzymes to digest the food. Then it's going to dump into your small intestine to be absorbed. The nutrients will be absorbed. All of the remaining material, which we hope has a bunch of types of fibers in it, which we consider prebiotic, they empty into the colon, and they just become this beautiful mixture of fermentable fibers that then your body creates a whole series of enzymes and small molecules from. This grows your microbiome, and it also trains your immune system. It sends signals to your brain telling you how wonderful this was and that you feel good, you have energy, your mitochondria get stimulated by this process, your muscles. This is the phenomenon we want to do, and this is not what we're doing anymore. Processed food change all of this. The quick answer is not targeting one hormone. It's resetting our body to process these hormones, to develop food relationships, and then we're going to adjust our metabolism all over again from all of this. I know I was kind of a roundabout, so I'm hoping you have some questions to help cut that.
Yeah, I'll help put it together for
Yeah.
you. That's what happens when you're like over smart. But I got you, Dr. Morris.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
This man is a genius, y'all. I could just listen to him all day. But for those who aren't cool nerds like we are, I'll just see if I can
I love it.
bring it down a little bit. But yeah, I get you. But just in case, but what we're talking about is GLP, right? And a lot of people have heard of it through semaglutides like Ozempic and Wegovy and things like that. So what I love about what you just explained is GLP is a natural hormone in our bodies, and it is this drugs that mimic that. But what you're doing is explaining how it naturally works, but it doesn't work isolated. You know, a lot of the medications and solutions out there now don't integrate all the other hormones, but you put it nicely how it naturally works with insulin, pancreatic enzymes, and how it's important, and even the probiotics. So what people need to understand in summary is that these hormones work together. You can't isolate it and put all the responsibility on one hormone. It's about a balance and what's the word? I can't think of the word. I guess metabolism, how it metabolizes. So how did I do?
You did great. And I think, and you've also helped me kind of add to your summary. I mean, that's the beauty of it is we have, you're right, there's all this understanding we have, and we need to distill it down into how do we affect it in a way that our metabolism gets better. We can lose weight. We're in control of our metabolism, because it seems right now that most of us are not in control because we may be overweight, we may be suffering from fatigue, a lot of immunological issues, right? These are all part and parcel to the bigger picture. And it seems overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. We can really distill it down into a few areas of health that we start practicing. And we all understand these, but how do we do it? Because just using something like a GLP-1 agonist to drive down our satiety, which could for some people lead to weight loss, but it also leads to muscle loss and to other now emerging problems. And for many people, it's a cycle, right? They get off of it, now they're back up to their old weight, because it's not the solution. It's putting a paint job over a 1980s Duster car, right? It's still a really, really terrible car. And we've just given it a nice new shiny paint job. It's just not a good way to think about it. Not sustainable for your brain health, right? For example, if you might be losing weight, but is your brain getting healthier? Is your heart getting healthier? And the answer seems to be no, because we haven't addressed those pieces. We haven't addressed the interplay between the gut, between our metabolism and our brain. They're in constant communication. How is our dopamine behaving? How is our epinephrine and our acetylcholine? How do we tie all this up to in a nice package with a bow on top? Well, it's not easy, but we can do a lot towards this. So if we think of the metabolic problem, and we know there are some key players. The biggest two are our diet, biggest three: diet, lifestyle, and then microbiome. And the microbiome plays a role because it's directly affected by our lifestyle and our diet. If you have an ultra processed diet, you have a microbiome that is not working for you. It is a very specific craving microbiome that wants you to eat sugar. It wants you to eat processed foods. It's unhealthy. If you looked at it, if you could put it under a microscope, you would see that there's a lot of bad actors in that microbiome. And bad actors produce bad compounds. They produce toxic compounds. How do we get there? Well, from the get-go, even from moms, I want moms to be particularly interested in this concept because they give their microbiome to the baby, the way they're born, and then what they were eating, and then they're breastfeeding. And so that sets that baby up for the journey of the microbiome. It's generational. And so what dictates the microbiome? Well, your exposure to toxins, like antibiotics specifically, and your diet and your exercise, your lifestyle choices, being in nature. And we all can talk about that. We all understand that. Conceptually, it's easy. But how do we start going back to that? And one of the ways in which we love to offer that, of course, I'm biased because I'm in the supplement world, is we have these prebiotic foods that feed the microbiome, and they're all designed around a healthy, diverse microbiome. And then we have these keystone probiotics that are lost from microbiomes that have been unhealthy for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years of someone's life. And like I say, that all depends on how many exposures they've had, what kind of diet they've had. And it's all over the board, right? Some people have a horrible microbiome. Some people have a terrible microbiome. Some people have a really dysfunctional microbiome. Some people, it's a gradient. It's never just one size fits all. But when you put them on this journey, you start rebuilding these microbiomes. And I think something you and I have talked about in the past is, let's just pick on GLP-1 as an example. Our GLP-1 numbers prior to this lifestyle that we have now and all these terrible food choices and exposures, it was at a really healthy level. You can still find it in healthy levels, again, in people that are not living in our world, or this part of our world. And so we're not trying to increase GLP-1 to compensate for some other choice. What we're doing is recovering the lost GLP-1 activity. And that's just one element. We've lost other hormones. We just don't talk about those. But most women would agree that they feel like some of their estrogen is high, like estrogen dominance, or with fertility issues, progesterone is low, and it makes it so the egg doesn't implant properly in these younger kids. So they're having more infertility problems. These are all connected. We've lost a lot of these, what used to be normal processes are now not functioning properly. So we're not just talking about one, we're talking about all of them, but you can recapture them all through this journey of paying attention to a really healthy diet. You may have to work through it. You may have to start simple, start with a higher protein and move gradually into plants. As you're bringing back these organisms, fibers become more easily digested. If you have a really unhealthy microbiome and you go jump directly into prebiotics and high plant diet, you might have a really horrible reaction: bloating, gassing, cramping, constipation. We want to ease into these things. If you're a vegetarian, but your protein intake and some nutrients, and you want to shift that a little bit, again, we can do it slowly. We don't have to rush into it. It's not an overnight pill. Let's work backwards into that. Let's clean up our diet. Let's clean up our exposure. And this will, in turn, raise natural GLP-1 levels. In fact, the product that you and I talked about is the Metabolic Biomic and the Metabolic Superfood. And of course, we do research on the backside, but one of the benefits to that is that it naturally raises GLP-1. It's not a mystery. It's not like a miracle. It's GLP-1 should normally be produced when you eat these kinds of plant foods and when you have these microbes around, because it's released from the L cells of our gut. And when they do that, they're signaling, hey, we've got all this food. it's got to take its next journey. We're going to release this hormone to let the brain know what's going on, to let all of the intestinal cells know, right? This is what hormones do. They're the phone call, they're the signaling that happens. And when that signaling is cut short for a lot of reasons, we don't have time to go through them all, but we've discussed some of them, then everything starts to go awry. And as we bring that signaling back, you find that secondary signaling starts to come up. With when the food and the receptors all start acting together, and the probiotics or the organisms in the microbiome start behaving as a team again, we start noticing our hormones coming back online. We start noticing something as simple as bowel movements to come back online. We have fewer reactions to food. Our sensitivities start to decrease. We start understanding that we can have more diversity in our diet that we didn't even dare do before. And the consequence of all that is our metabolism. We start getting a better metabolism, and we're working, and there's more to the story, of course. We got to work on other things, but that by itself can help people start making themselves feel better so that they have time to focus on other aspects of health, other aspects of fitness and longevity, for example.
Yeah. And I want the listeners to understand is like everything we need is in us. All right. But it's like our culture and our society that has brought in all these foods and toxins that have been in our system. And what's happened is over time is like generation after generation are so out of touch with how our bodies work. They're not in touch with nature. They're not in touch with where our food comes from and how it's produced. Because now you can eat a salad, and that salad might be causing wreaking havoc on your body. So sometimes the diet alone isn't enough because people aren't really understanding all tomatoes aren't created equal. It all depends on how it was raised. But a lot of us aren't really taught that and don't understand that. So there's people blindly doing things, trusting, the system. I'll just say it that way, and believing that it's the right thing. But I think a lot of it comes from not knowing what we know. I mean, we love this stuff. We read books on it. This is what we do in our free time. So, but a lot of people don't read the books and do the research, go to the conferences. So I want people to understand you have to understand your body. And if you don't, link with someone that does to help you understand how your body works. Because you said this earlier as well, there's no one size fits all. And we have to understand you might get lucky. If you did a diet and you lost the weight and you felt great, you got lucky. You got lucky.
It was, a lot of people are in that cycle for, decades, years and decades, because they haven't really understood it. And most people think, oh my gosh, that's so much. Shayne just said so much about so much. It's true, but we can think about it in simplistic ways, understanding our food. And our job is to be transparent, is to educate. And we want to bring back, and I do it in supplement form, but even we encourage the dietary changes, the lifestyle, because these things that we're exposed to, they're kind of an abstract idea that we're exposed to chemicals, phthalates, pesticides. We don't see them. They're not tactile, they're not visible, but we know that they're endocrine disruptors. We know that they're liver toxins. We know that they actually kill a lot of our microbes. Where we come in is helping you detoxify those things, helping you bring back microbes, helping you bring back these plant compounds that stimulate your body in a way that your ancestors did. Your ancestors ate and consumed a lot of herbal components, a lot of nutrients that we now are bringing back to the table with these supplements that weren't so unusual. Right now they're unusual. And someone says, oh yeah, I got to take ashwagandha and I've got to take this weird, plant flower. In these supplements, it seems peculiar, and it might even seem almost like a medicine in some ways, but our ancestors consumed these things regularly. If you look at even the Native American diet, throughout the course of a year, they ate 1,400 types of herbs, and they only ate around 800 types of foods. So they were grazing on these things. They were cooking with these things. They were using them when they needed to be used, because that's what our body wants. That's what our microbes want. It's how we want to pursue our health. And so we're not really, I love to say that our research is fun and new and exciting, and we do a lot of that. But oftentimes we're just explaining what our ancestors knew instinctively. They knew it through their life and their behavior and their experience, and yet we're revisiting it and trying to explain it to people on how it works. So it's not just trust me, this is good for you. It's no, here's how we know it's good for you. I think that's the new paradigm. We want to know how and why.
Yeah. You said something key as well. It's like, when you think about, back in the day, it was more it was in their backyard. They harvested. They didn't go to Publix or Kroger to get their food. It was harvested. It was grown. Because you brought that up, and I was just thinking about what I'm doing now. I just recently took up gardening in the last 3 or 4 years. It's fascinating, and not only that, I'm looking at the plants in my yard. I have a very wooded yard, and I learned that I have a black walnut tree. I didn't know what that thing was. I have muscadines in my yard, so now I'm starting to trellis them so they'll grow. I have an elderberry tree. I'm like, that's an elderberry tree. So I'm starting to look up every plant, and I'm like, there's right there in the backyard. But we're living in a culture now. Cut them down. They're a nuisance. Let's spray the weeds. But a lot of the weeds that are in our yard are actually medicine. So that's why now we're killing all this stuff in our own yard, and then we're taking them as supplements. That's why we need supplements, because we don't have access like we did hundreds of years ago, or we're not familiar with them. So a lot of these herbs and things, like I said, when your grandfather was studying this work, it all comes from the earth, but we have got so disconnected. So I was just kind of tickled. So I'm gonna figure out what to do with this elderberry, but
Hey, those are really good. Yeah, we love
yeah.
elderberry. We use them in a lot of our plants. Of course, we use them medicinally, therapeutically. The ones in the superfoods we use to build the microbiome. And like you as a human or me as a human, we need a lot of these compounds. But it's interesting because so many of these compounds don't work on people, just like food doesn't work on people when they want to shift their metabolism. You say, well, just start eating salads. And they say, okay, I've done this now for 6 months. I haven't lost a pound. I'm frustrated with you because you told me if I just went to salads or just went to veggies, I was going to lose all this weight. And I haven't, because one of the journeys we're on is the microbes, if they're not there to convert the food into what we need, because we've destroyed the microbial populations. It's an ecosystem. It's like your forest. We've gone in and we've cut down all the trees. We've killed all the weed, or all the plants that we used to think were bad, or using antibiotics and all these toxins. So our microbiome is a very stripped down version of a forest. In order to get it to do what you need it to do for your metabolism, you got to bring it back. And there's work that was done a decade ago in mice, for example. You can take an obese mouse, and they start off with sterile mice, and they take an obese mouse and they take a thin mouse, a healthy mouse. If you take the obese stool and feed it to the thin mouse, it becomes obese. You don't change the diet. You don't change anything else, activity or anything. The microbes in that mouse's GI tract dictates the obesity of the mice and rats. And now we've seen other versions of that in humans since then, right? That was a decade ago. They figured out that the microbiome was absolutely linked with obesity just by transplanting. Now, if they took a thin mouse stool, and put it back in the obese mouse, he became thin. Now, of course, we don't want people running around and eating, thin people's stool. That's not what we're advocating here. And we're more complex people. So that just showed us that the microbiome is central to what we're doing, and we need to bring a lot of that back without question. It's an important factor here. And so how do we do that? We rebuild it through bringing the bugs back, bringing what feeds them back. And that's our bugs and, the eubiomics and the superfoods. And then I would say even beyond the metabolic, because the metabolic is an important piece, but I always advocate for, we have about 9 different versions of probiotics and prebiotics, and I want people to go through all of them. We may be focusing initially on metabolic, but I want them to go through the skin, their neurological, the hormone, and the immune, and so on, because that creates the overall diversity as we journey forward. Because again, metabolic is connected to the brain. There might be some gut-brain bugs that we need to bring back. There might be some gut immune bugs that we might need to bring back and feed them. And so it is a journey. Some people take longer than others. Some people respond quickly. Some people it takes more time. But in the end, it makes your food digest better. It makes you able to extract nutrients from your food better. It helps you become resilient to stress and to the lifestyle that we do live. I mean, it's impossible to go back to our ancestors' lifestyle where we're all living in really wide open spaces with access to animals and food. And, that's not possible for all of us. Our jobs can be stressful, our lives, et cetera. So we have to adapt. But our bugs will adapt more quickly if we treat them right. They adapt very quickly. They're very plastic. Well, that's a wrong word. They're very dynamic. They're not actually plastic, but they're what we call plastic because they can adapt quickly to what we need them to do.
And I know you shared a lot, and I don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed or discouraged, but it's like this is just something that's been evolving in our society at least 50, 60 years. It's been evolving and it's just getting worse in my opinion. But there are tools and strategies out there. But I think a lot of people that we help have to have a different mindset. But it's just like all these quick fixes are being pushed and a lot of less education about where our food comes from and how our body works is being taken away. A lot of people don't understand how their digestive system works and they think that they can eat whatever they want. And if they don't drop dead within 20 minutes, they're going to be okay. But it is like a slow progression over time. We are slowing down our body. I guess I don't know what to call it without being sad and gloomy. What do you call it?
We don't want to. Become the
Progress the process.
doomsayers, right? Yeah.
I don't want to be doomsday, but I just know that that's what we're doing. The food is either going to hurt us or heal us, but we have to have that mindset. We need to eat the things, nourish our bodies with the things that's going to help heal and nourish our bodies. And that's the microbiome and all these other things that you had mentioned, the diet, the lifestyle, being in tune with our body and know what we need. And our microbiome we all have a unique microbiome as well. And I was thinking about when you were talking about mothers, how we pass on our microbiome to our children. And I remember when I was pregnant, that's when I first learned about fermented foods. I was pregnant and eating sauerkraut and I was doing all that. So it is important. And I know it has made a difference in my life when I incorporate these things. My body loves, I guess most bodies do, but my body really loves it. And I love your new product. I have some clients that are taking it, the superfood and I can't remember that.
Yeah,
The
the metabolic biomic and the metabolic.
I see that
Yeah.
yellow U thing, and I'm like, is that supposed to be pronounced or what?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, you had to throw that in
for
there.
stands for microbiome, but you
Okay.
use micro. Yeah,
Got it. Okay, that is the micro.
that
Okay.
explains it. Yep.
But it's a great product, but I would love you to do a brief introduction on the newer products that you have introduced recently.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, one of the things you said that was beautiful is that the fermented food piece and the generational piece and this concept of personalized, because everybody is going to respond differently to foods. Some people respond subtly differently to good foods, good for you foods. And that's okay. I think that this idea of getting yourself in tune with your body, educating yourself, I would never, ever tell anybody not to get educated. Educate yourself on the things you eat, the things you enjoy, and educate yourself on the microbiome, see how powerful it is. And then, of course, we've got things like our genetics and our herbal components. So you're getting the microbiome and all these things that we can incorporate into our life. Get educated. Don't overwhelm yourself, but there's good podcasts like yours where we can talk through these things. If you're out in the yard working or driving, you can just podcast, right? That's the brilliance of podcasts, is you can listen to it anytime. But get educated, because this will invigorate you to understand that the journey we're on, it is a journey. It never goes away. There's genetics behind us that give who we are. Your ancestors, that the ancestral part of our journey also dictates what types of foods we're likely to respond to more favorably. For example, if you're born in a country where you're more equatorial, or your ancestors were, be aware of the foods your ancestors ate in the equatorial. If you're born in the Inuit tribe of Alaska, you want to be, your genetics are designed around things like much more lard and blubber. And, you didn't have very many oranges and bananas growing up in Alaska, to have access to. So, our genetics and our history is part of this journey. And that's kind of fun. That's a really fun topic, by the way, to look at. You can take your genetics, and for example, we run a genetics panel, right? And people here that have done it here at work, they've gone in and researched their genetics against databases of food and said, oh my gosh, I should be eating more herring because I'm Scandinavian. And when they start eating it, they're like, at first I would have been deathly afraid of this food, and now I'm enjoying it. So as you do these things, you might trigger cravings for foods that you never thought you'd have. And these are good foods. You can overcome cravings for donuts and, Sour Patch Kids or whatever those things are. You'd be surprised that when you shift this slowly, that you start developing new cravings for things that you didn't know you would crave based on all this. And so in terms of product lineup, we've built our products based on all the knowledge that we've accumulated so far. And there will be changes because we're learning as well as you guys. We're adjusting and learning. But so far what we've done is, from my grandfather's time forward, he was very much heavily into the medicinal and therapeutic herbs and some nutrients like, the regular defined nutrients are vitamins, minerals, and organ tissues, DNA and RNA. That we're continuing that tradition. We have those, they're still in place under the systemic formula line. The research we've done more to understand mechanisms, and a lot of our functional practitioners that we know how to affect blood labs and parasite labs and, mold exposures and microbiome issues and neurological transmitters. That's the Alimentum side. And so really what we're excited to bring to people is we've already brought online the DNA test, which allows us to assess our needs for nutrients based on our genetics. We're working on the microbiome test right now. But regardless, we have two product lines called the genic formulas, and these are highly potent herbal and nutrient designed formulas, but they're designed around what we call the further biological components, meaning that they're more bioavailable in the sense that when you think of what vitamins and minerals and other plants do, they do it through their small molecules. We call them small molecules, just things that are inside of plants, and things that are, like, for example, pyridoxine can be pyridoxine, which is B6, or it can be pyridoxine 5-phosphate. When you consume pyridoxine 5-phosphate, it goes right to the cell. When you consume pyridoxine, it has to be converted by your body into pyridoxine 5-phosphate. So the Alimentum line uses the end product of nutrients, not the beginning product. And that's because we want to get things to the cell more rapidly. When we look at the biome side of the Alimentum line, we've studied all of the foods and polyphenols and flavonoids and oligosaccharides for bugs that can be converted into feeding our bugs, feeding these key stone species, as well as getting converted into things your body needs. And then we, of course, add in the keystone species through the biomic line, right? So the hormone biomic offers in a bunch of keystone species that are well studied for their hormone influence, or the neurological biomic or neurobiomic offers probiotics that have keystone species that have been shown to influence our neurological health. And likewise with the immune, the skin, and so on. And we are coming out with some new ones. So these new lines really complement the systemic formulas line. And the emerging research, which I haven't told people much about, and it is complicated, so I'm going to try to make it simple. Your microbiome is a giant manufacturing plant, right? It's an ecosystem. So when you think of a forest can produce food, a forest can produce water, a forest can produce all kinds of amazing things when you walk into the forest. It's producing all kinds of stuff for the animals, for the insects, for the whole ecosystem. Your microbiome is the same kind of concept. It's producing food for itself. It's producing food for the body. It produces food for our colon cells. It produces food for our immune system. It produces messages. It produces hormones. Your microbiome can produce things like GABA, serotonin, dopamine, acetylcholine. So this new idea that, and it's documented research that your microbiome is producing neurotransmitters that influence the way your brain works immediately. So if your microbiome stops working and you feel depressed, well, there's that connection. You're no longer producing the dopamine in your gut that was helping you navigate through the day, right? It wasn't just your own body producing it, it was the gut producing it. So it's this giant ecosystem that helps you produce things. When you feed it medicinal herbs and food, it turns them into things you want to. If you have a really horrible gut, that means a horrible manufacturing plant, then you're going to be producing toxins. Not just the toxins you consume, but now your gut is actually making toxins every day, all day, every night, all night. And so we need to fix our gut because it is crucial to the detoxification process. And when it's broken, even if you're trying to clean your water, get organic food, if your gut isn't in play as part of that solution, it's making things that are bad for you. It's making hormone disruptors. It's making metabolic disruptors. And it's part of our problem. So we need to make it part of the solution, which is why I love the microbiome, right? It is part of the solution.
Incredible. I could go on, but I know people are like, what do I do? Hey, I'm trained in this stuff. I got resources, I got access, but I wish I could say there's one size fits all here, grab a bottle of this and everything's going to be okay. It's all individualized. So I will have a link in the description where you can get in touch with me for an individualized assessment so you can understand how, the state of your microbiome and your overall health, and we'll figure out the products that work best for you. So I have been a loyal client of Systemic Formulas and Alimentum Labs for decades now. Well, not Alimentum because, that was recent, but Systemic Formulas. I've been a loyal client for customer for, I don't know, what am I? What am I called? A customer? I've been dealing with using Systemic Formulas for at least 20 years. So the trainings, and I want you to come back to talk about the genetic tests.
Indeed. Yes. That's a fun
Yeah,
topic.
we're going to have you come back for that one. We won't get into that one. But yes, get in touch with me if you're interested in a lot of these products that he mentioned. So like I said, I think that's good enough.
Yeah,
I
it's a
know,
lot.
I know they're
It's a
kind of
lot.
clouded over right now, but let me know what you think. If you're listening and you're like, well, what did he mean by this? And what did y'all mean by that? It's your questions that can help us clarify what you need to understand. We're here to educate. The Hill Deal podcast is about giving you education. Yeah, it might make you feel sad or might make you feel confused, but if you feel that way, that means we are teaching you something you haven't heard of. It's natural to feel this way. This isn't one of those feel good kind of podcasts where we're like, yes, take this 3 times a day and you're going to be okay. We have to talk about sometimes the pain of healing because it's there. And too many of us are trying to avoid that learning curve or that struggle. So that's why we're here. It does start with education. And we love this stuff. You don't have to do all the research. We'll do that for you and we'll help you understand what you need. So this is amazing.
Yeah,
So,
it's always a lot. But you're
so
right.
we are going to have you come back.
We want to stimulate them to think. And then if they have a lot of questions, hey, we're here. I'm with
Yeah,
you.
we're
We're
here.
always here. We're always here to chunk it down, dice. I mean, this is the fun part of it. And there's nothing more meaningful than life, right? You can have 1,000 dreams in your life, but if you're unhealthy, you have one dream, and that's to get healthy again.
Yes. And this is fun to us.
Yes.
This is fun. This is what we like to talk about. Any closing comments, Dr. Morris? This is great.
I'm so grateful to be here, and I hope that at a minimum we stimulated some excitement or some thought provoking because we want to take charge of this. And you're right, it's something that it's a journey. It's not just take this pill and, call me in 3 days. It's not how it works. And we know that. We know that it's about a much bigger picture. And like anything, any good relationship takes work. And this is our relationship with our own body. And we know that it's going to take some work. And it's fun work. I mean, it's exciting because when you feel fantastic and you can do things, you're active and you're enjoying your kids, your grandkids, your spouse. I mean, it's amazing. And there's nothing better than that. Yeah, there's nothing better than that.
Exactly. And I would love to, I'm going to highlight some of the products and, why we do what we do, because you're very good at educating us about why we do what we do. So I'm excited about really letting people know about your amazing company. So,
I really
we'll
appreciate
talk
that.
about, yeah, when we are off camera, we'll schedule your next series with the genetic testing, because I think that's absolutely incredible. Okay. So stay tuned for that, y'all. But in the meantime, uh, thank you, Dr. Shayne Morris, for really taking the time out your busy schedule to share what I know you're very passionate about. I always looking forward to the times I get to talk to you and learn from you. I even learn something new every time I talk to you. So thank you. And thank you, listeners, for joining in. And again, I know this was a lot, but if you have any questions or need some kind of follow up, hey, let us know and we'll be happy to make that clear, because the key is to give you what you need to keep moving forward. It is a process and you need the tools. It is an evolution. So we're going to let you go. And as always, y'all keep healing, keep evolving, keep showing up for the healthiest version of you. And until next time, take care. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, seal the deal to heal by leaving a review, subscribing to the podcast, and sharing with a friend. Thanks again, and we'll continue the journey next week.